I hope you are not already tired of hearing this, but I will say this a lot of the episodes from this season. This one is one of my favorites from season 3 and maybe from the whole series as well. I loved the story arc with Father Paul, and it was so sad to see him leave so soon, especially with his quick death. This whole sequence feels so real. How they rush into hospital and Emily is cast aside, because the doctors and nurses are eager to save the patient, and also because Emily is no family. Even I, as I drove so many times to hospital with my late mother, was not informed for hours if she was all right or not. Regarding keeping relatives updated, or at least tell us if our beloved family member is already dead or still alive, they can only do better. I really love Emily Van Camp's performance in this. If I did not know better, I would assume she is the wife, or at least a good friend who cannot stand being this powerless in front of death. I know her devastation has a lot to do with guilt, cause there is this question if her poisoning Conrad was the reason for the accident. By the way, I was happy that they cleared it up that this was not the case, cause accidental murder would have been nothing I would wish to see on Emily's list of sins. But it is also a lot to do with how much Father Paul has become more than an ally but a friend and someone to confess to. He could have become a real confidant for her. So I really felt with Emily in this scene. About Conrad alleged killing Father Paul. I think they have been too tame with this. I mean, I liked the little riddle here, and I guess they needed something to fill the episodes till the big wedding event, but for me it would have been a far better outcome if Conrad actually would have killed Father Paul. Not only accidentally as they assume here, but willingly. As I said in the previous episode, it could have really be Conrad's intention to lure Paul into a trap here. Cause, as Victoria points out, Conrad was well aware that he should not drive with his Huntington disease, and driving a Ferrari at full speed is, even for an experienced and healthy driver, an enormous challenge. So I think Conrad might have changed his mind about confessing, or maybe did not want to do this at all, because he knew how persistent Paul can be and that he as a conspirator knew enough to confess himself. Conrad maybe wanted to take control about the situation by getting rid of a confidant like he did with someone else later in the season. Those who have already seen this season know whom I talk about. I just love this scene in Conrad's hospital room. It is really like a little stage play. And all three Graysons give us a marvelous performance. First, Victoria, whose reaction may be the closest one to the audience, cause it seems to be as Conrad is responsible for this accident and tries to lie his way out of this like always. Daniel, who just wants to prevent a scandal for the sake his and Margot's business with Voulez, naturally takes the side of his father, even though from experience he must know better than to trust him. And Emily being in the middle, having no other way than to tell the truth about what she saw. Even though she hates that this would exonerate the one man she hates more than everyone else. On top, Conrad's reaction. You can see in Emily's eyes to what extent this fuels her hate and need for payback. About Victoria and Patrick again. I know he cannot know better since he gets his information from Victoria and filtered by her. But it is really hard to stomach after all that she has done to Amanda and knowing what she will do to Emily this season. How Victoria is wallow in self-pity. Again, it seems to me that she dismisses completely what role she played in framing David and sealing young Amanda's fate. Not to mention how badly she has been treating her daughter Charlotte and the crimes she committed in the last season. So it is funny that she is using her children again as an excuse to stay with Conrad while Patrick tries to help her. He seems really invested even though they know each other only this short period of time. A shame how she is using and manipulating him. Cause like every child who has been adopted, he just wants to know where he is coming from. Even worse, he seems to be in desperate need of Victoria's approval and admiration like Daniel was before. Like with Daniel, she is using lies and manipulation to bind Patrick closer to him since her other two children are drifting farther away from her and Victoria cannot stand to be alone. Spoiler alert, which is a huge reason for her to turn to David. Since after Conrad's and Pascal's death and her imprisoned, which shattered the relationship to Daniel and Charlotte, Victoria had no one left to turn to. Resuming this relationship seemed the only way out for her. So I guess in the end Patrick is one of the many victims of her lies. About Charlotte's and Jack's conversation. That is the thing I probably like the most in this and the next season. The different levels of knowledge between the characters. And how they are talking in code. Charlotte does not know yet how right she is with her quote that she does not know the real Emily Thorne. 'Cause she is still in the dark, while Jack already knows Emily's biggest secret. And him talking about getting some space between him and Emily is hilariously funny cause it has a double meaning. Charlotte understands that he has enough of Emily because she played with his feelings in 2 years ago. When she was engaged to Daniel for the first time and broke it off over their kiss without telling him. But in reality Jack means that he cannot stand Emily's fake persona anymore and does not approve her vendetta against the Graysons. Anyway, it is interesting to see how all of Jack's relationships and beliefs are influenced by knowing the truth about Amanda. About this conversation between Emily, Aiden and Nolan. Again, this feels more like a theater play. I like that they take full advantage of the extended cast this season. In season 2 it seems to me we had much less scenes with more than 2 actors. Besides big parties or similar events, we had more of these pairing scenes. Anyway, I love the discussion here because I am with Emily and Aiden. Yes, it would have been a dangerous plan to murder Paul in a car accident and sitting with him in the car for yourself. But Conrad, who believes he is destined to die soon, has nothing more to lose. So he would have risked his own life by getting rid of Father Paul. Would not have been that crazy as it sounds. And I love how restless everyone is. Gives us the audience a new opportunity to see Nolan's house and the decorum, which really looks like he is not only a fan of art, but also of Asian art. Maybe influenced by Takeda? And the outfits for everyone are not that bad either. Nolan's casual look with those different shades of blue looks really fresh and fitting for him. Aiden again very British with his vest and the striped shirt. Last but not least Emily, who looks casual but sophisticated in her shirt with embroidery in this shade of light pink or nude. She looks very feminine and fragile, and I like how Aiden tries to comfort and calm her down. Yet again Emily shows us how little influence Aiden and Nolan have on her when she is determined and wants something. About Victoria's new gallery job. This little story arc was just nice. Filled with cliché but nice. I love to see how ruthless and determined Victoria is. As she pointed out to Emily in the finale of season 2, in this point she and Emily are very much alike. They both are very strong-willed women who will stop at nothing to reach their goals. Interesting how they managed to show in which environment Victoria lives with that little effort. We just see her interact with this gallery lady who seems to be as much ambitious and greedy as the Graysons are. And as Victoria repaid her, it was clear that she would have done the exact same thing if she had someone coming to ask her for help. Victoria would have enjoyed her demise and made her feel bad by degrading her, and toying with her pain would have made fun. About Emily's and Daniel's fight. What is interesting within these big fights they have this season? They really managed to show us both sides, not only Emily's. To be on Daniel's side would have been said too much for me. But I can understand him and his point of view. He is under much pressure because he started this new business with Margot. and falling into old patterns by helping his father is something like Daniel's core pattern. He is always trying to help and understand his parents, and getting their approval seems still crucial for him. But in the end he is always let down and disappointed by them. Bribing the police is despicable, no doubt. And again an overused cliché for the shamefully rich people. However, think about it. I cannot see another way out for Daniel. Even if his father would have been acquitted and all charges had been dropped, the start of his magazine would have either had to be delayed, which would have cost money, or worse, the magazine and its reputation could have been damaged by the scandalization of this investigation. On the other hand, to present Emily with a fait accompli and depriving her of the opportunity to make a statement was a real no-go. Was he afraid Emily could have said something different than last night in the hospital? Or did he just think she could not handle the pressure and would have been tricked by the police to say something that would have been not so good for his father's investigation? Either way, he should have trusted Emily that she could handle herself and make a statement that was either the truth but still in favor to her future father-in-law. Cause he has still no clue that Emily could have been interested in getting his father in jail. So I can totally understand her bewildered reaction. Even more as she would have had already a plan to take Conrad down with this. Maybe she wanted to create a situation in which Conrad would have been faced with new prison time during the investigation. Because of some, of course, accidentally uttered doubts about Father Paul driving and causing the accident by Emily in her interrogation. If so, Daniel would have ruined her plan by making a statement for her. By the way, this sequence really shows us the cliché, which is sadly true till today. The police tends to truth men more. So it is no big deal that Daniel as a man made a statement for his fiancée. A woman whose word is not as trustworthy as the man's. By the way, I like Emily's retaliation. Not her best, but it made Daniel really mad, so it worked. The fight afterwards was one of my favorites because their conversation and the topic is still so universal. Besides the double meaning that Emily is always keeping secrets because she is constantly lying and manipulating Daniel. The problems they have are typical for most pairings. They simply have grown in different directions and seem not to find a new way to walk towards each other again instead of drifting apart. His assumptions that Emily is doing this as some kind of punishment because he has spent less time with her shows how little he knows her and was a big insult for her and her intelligence, too. Emily could not care less if he spends enough quality time with her. In fact, she is trying to get him as long and as far from the beach house as she can in order to see her revenge agenda through. And it would have been really childish of her to take such measures only to get his attention. I think he must know that Emily would have had much better ways to draw his attention in her direction if she wanted to. But in one thing he is right, how manipulative and revengeful Emily actually is. So he seems to know her a little bit better than in season 1. Cause in my opinion such an accusation would not even have crossed his mind in season 1. Seems as if the perfect illusion and image of Emily as the perfect girlfriend and boy toy has become some flaws. About Nolan and Patrick. I like this underlining theme Nolan has through the whole show. Besides Padma, maybe he always fell in love with people who were outsiders. First Amanda aka Emily Thorne, who really has a hold on him. Then Tyler in season 1. Who seemed to have a rough background for himself not only because of his mental health issues. And now Patrick, who has serious family and identity issues since he was abandoned by his mother, whose name is Victoria Grayson. Spoiler alert. Finally Louise in season 4. Again a fragile woman with mental health issues but a good heart. About Emily, Aiden and Jack. Maybe this was the writer's attempt to keep Emily's and Jack's romance alive even though they cannot be together for obvious reasons. While season 2 it was all about Aiden being jealous of Daniel and their love triangle. Now they make it pretty obvious that Emily is in love with Aiden and cannot stand Daniel anymore. And as much she is disgusted by Daniel as much Aiden's jealousy is shifting from Daniel to Jack. Even more as he knows since Nolan told him that Emily was willing to stop her vendetta for Jack but not for him. I am not quite sure if it was a clever idea to keep Jack in the game. Or if it was a last desperate attempt to save Jack a place in Emily's heart so they can nurture the tiny flame in the last season. Anyway, as I said before, I hate the two fighting this much. More than her and Aiden actually, since they did it from the beginning. But Jack always felt like someone who loves harmony. And before his wife died they did not fight once. So for me all those scenes were some kind of painful to watch. Like this one in which Emily is all in defense and Jack is again super angry and sarcastic with her. I hate that he is this rude and unfair to her. I mean, she really does her best with a great and powerful enemy. And I hate even more that she is declining his offer to help time and time again. Maybe he would have made things worse cause Jack is not at all as planful and controlled as Emily. But as we see in the second half of this season, it is no bad idea to have more help in this was. By the way, I knew he was planning to do something stupid. You can see it in Jack's face that he does let it go. In a way, he and Emily are both very stubborn. Which makes them fighting even more undesirable to watch since both will not give in. As we see here when they both are discovering Conrad's Ferrari. I always hated this scene not only because of their really dumb fight and Jack using his even more dumb and obvious threat again. Emily wearing her hoodie again and this new revelation about the brakes just feels so forced. I was very much disappointed and sadly even reminded on season 2 when I saw the storyline unfold here. And I hate to say it, but Jack is really annoying me with his persistent empty threat that he uses as some kind of joker in every fight with her. His need to meddle in Emily's plans is not better either. Here he may have been a help, but mostly he is just standing in Emily's way and trying to pursue her to drop the whole thing. Which might have been better for Emily's peace of mind but is not very helpful. About Nolan spying after Patrick. This scene was funny and sad. And I did not quite recall if Emily made him look for Patrick's secrets. Or if he himself wanted to make sure that he is not again walking into a trap like he was with Tyler in season 1. Sweet is his reluctance to use modern technology and this play with a computer addiction. I know it is a sensible topic and for some people addictions to computer games, social media or the World Wide Web in general is a big problem. But I cannot help myself. Always when I see this scene I must laugh. And I think it is good that Nolan stirs up some dirt. So he can know what he is getting into when he gets serious with Patrick. I think this relationship was probably the most honest and mature in Nolan's life throughout the show, of course. For the first time his partner knows about Emily and her problems with Victoria and that Nolan is right in the middle of it. So he can understand his problems and Nolan has nothing to hide anymore. That was a huge step for him and maybe made his spoiler alert deep connection and relationship with Louise even possible. What was really disappointing is that they fell into the old pattern from the previous series. In this episode they kept us hooked what dark secret could be behind Patrick's first marriage only to disappoint us in the next. Again a wild goose chase that was pointless. About Conrad's wisdom on relationships for Daniel. I know, a new deep dive into soap opera cliches. But I always liked this one. Not only because Conrad always seemed fond of Emily. As much as he admires Victoria's strong character, as much he is appreciating Emily's strong will. Finally, he seems to see the similarities between these two women. Without a doubt, the reason why he always had such a good impression of Emily and liked the idea of her becoming Daniel's wife. Anyway, his advice concerning Emily's and Daniel's future matrimonial life are not the best. And it would have been wise from Daniel not to follow them in any kind. Especially those stupid ones that surely lead to Conrad's 3 failed marriages. But what I really like in this and the next scene is Daniel's sweater. I know it is silly, but in this season one have fallen in love with Daniel's style. After season 2, in which we saw him mostly in suit due to the fact he was now in charge of Grayson Global. In this season Daniel returned to his more casual looks from the first season. But instead of looking like a caricature of a preppy business student, he looks quite more sophisticated and grown up. Like this cable knit sweater, his fashion always has something special, and you can see that he prefers good quality and a timeless style. About the new love triangle between Emily, Aiden and Jack. This one was never much believable. First, it is just too much with her fake relationship with Daniel. Even Emily would have lost track if she was engaged with 3 men at one time. So they could not possibly let this option lead to a real relationship, at least in this season. Another reason is that they would have undermined her renewed relationship with Aiden. How could we accept that he was her soulmate and the one she wants to spend the rest of her life with if Jack was actually in the picture? Spoiler alert, and even worse, it would have diminished the impact of Emily's loss at the end of the season. So again, Aiden's jealousy is going nowhere because it has no worthy target in Jack, who is very far from becoming a threat for his and Emily's relationship. Even more as they are most of the time fighting when they are together. I know for Emily and Aiden this could be said, too. And more than once this lead to a very steamy and hot scene. But we never saw that kind of passion and chemistry between Jack and Emily. So for me it was always some kind of ridiculous how jealous Aiden is of Jack and his relation or better friendship with Emily. Again, I assume it is just a problem within Aiden's mind. 'Cause he feels constantly not good enough or worthy for Emily. In fact, Jack cannot compete with him 'cause he simply does not know who Emily Thorne is. Aiden knows her better than anyone else and understands her and her desires because he has literally the same. About Conrad's performance. As I said before, I like how playful Henry Czerny is in this season. Maybe he knew from the beginning that this would have been his last and wanted to left a big impression. In my opinion, he achieved that very well. I enjoyed his little performance here. Made it abundantly clear that he is the big bad now and a worthy adversary for Emily as her endgame for this season. And the reactions of Victoria, Emily and Daniel were just hilarious. Daniel seems almost amused by his father's performance, or maybe Joshua Bowman is by the acting skills of Henry Czerny. Who knows? Victoria is undoubtedly disgusted as Conrad proclaims his place on her side as master of the Grayson family. And Emily seems to be shocked and more than furious about how fast Conrad changed his position. About Emily and Daniel again. This is one of my favorite scenes between them because it is so revealing. The only thing I did not like is that they missed the chance to show us a photo of the first Grayson wedding. Since season 2, when Charlotte was going through their wedding album, I regret that we not have seen a photo of young Victoria as a Grayson bride. Here again they just show us this second wedding from the last season. But back to the new future bride and groom. As I said in my episode talks about season 2, In this season we see the first cracks in their relationship cause Daniel is finally doubting Emily and whether it is a good idea to marry her. Another trope in movies and TV shows in general. The boys or men are pursuing a girl that is hard to catch, and when they finally have her they do not want her anyone and chase her after the next one. Maybe it is natural to get cold feet as the wedding date comes closer. But I think he finally can see through Emily's facade. 'Cause she is not that good anymore faking it with Daniel. In season 1 the lines were blurred cause she had true feelings for Daniel, and as he became a real Grayson she made a clear cut. So in season 2 it was always a delicate dance. Daniel did not notice cause he was fully occupied with leading Grayson Global and getting rid of the initiative. Now that he has more time to think, and maybe because he takes more attention to details, he sees that something is not right in Emily's behavior towards him. So this was the most disarming and honest scene between the two so far. 'Cause Daniel finally sees that Emily's feelings for him are not that great and that he is far more invested in their relationship than she is. He sees the same as the audience. Emily cannot look him in the eye and say I love you because it is not true anymore. And she cannot or either want not fake it. So she is looking away. By the way, I like this wide shot with the checkered floor. Really makes you feel Emily's loneliness and how isolated she is. About Nolan's and Patrick's first kiss. I know the comments on the internet about how Nolan and his male partner only get those ashamed half-dark kissing scenes. And no sex scene at all. In defense, we see not that much sex scenes throughout the whole series, even with Emily the star of the show. Anyway, I like how nervous Nolan plays those scenes. It almost feels like he has become a new toy when he is starting a new relationship. He is anxious to make something wrong but also cannot wait to try things out. I like that childish character trait of him. About Aiden framing Jack. Maybe for some this was surprising, but for me it made totally sense. Since Jack wanted to kill Conrad by the end of season 2, he has the strongest motive. And Aiden, now that he knows Emily wanted to drop her vendetta for Jack 2 years ago and told him who she really is recently, has the strongest motive to frame him. Not to harm him, I think. Just to get rid of him and keep him away from Emily. But we will see in the next episode how this turns out. For now I think they got the audience hooked again. Since we all had the question in mind if Jack was that hard-boiled, fooling Emily and still trying to kill Conrad behind her back. And of course, if not, who was really behind the attempt.